Hey everyone, and welcome to this short hands-on review with the Canon R5C. My name is Andrew McGovern, and Wex Photo Video have very kindly offered me the chance to use this camera in return for giving some first-hand feedback for people who are interested in it and want to know a bit more what it's all about. Unfortunately, I can't show any delicious B-roll of the camera because no sooner had I got back from shooting, I had to return it. But there's plenty more videos on the internet floating around showing it off, let's be honest. Just a few quick provisos before I get into the bulk of it. Myself and Wex actually had a great little shoot planned, but under some extenuating circumstances, it turns out that shoot couldn't go ahead. So what we did instead was we agreed that I could take the camera out with me for a couple of days traveling with my mate Liam on a trip that we had already planned in Bruges. As we were traveling, and instead of shooting our planned piece, I had to make do without my lighting kit, my set of primes, all my audio gear, a gimbal, second camera body, monitoring equipment, heli cases, matte boxes, filters, and the rest of it. So instead, what I took along was the R5C with an EF adapted 24-70, 128GB CF Express and SD card, 4 batteries, and 1/4 black Pro Mist screw-in thread. So everything that you see here is actually shot on one zoom lens, and it's shot with one nice softening filter. I was given the green light to use this instead of my travel camera because, funnily enough, I just bought an R7, a Canon R7, and so that I was actually going to bring along with my C70, which is what I'm shooting on now, and it's what I usually use when I'm shooting video. And I was going to bring along a couple of lenses. As since the C70 came out, it's what I've been happy shooting with. I've never really paid attention to any other camera releases. The R7 was more of a replacement for a 5-6 year old 4/3 camera of mine. And the only reason I got rid of that was because I just wanted to move to one family of cameras. You know, no mixing and no matching anything else. So effectively, I was walking into the R5C blind, which I think is a great way to get to know a camera because I was fairly familiar with the specs but didn't look into it as much as maybe a prospective buyer would. I knew it could do 8K, but to be honest, not once did I ever think of giving it the thought of shooting 8K. Don't get me wrong, there's cropping and stabilization uses, but for what it actually would cost financially, physically and probably mentally, it just didn't make sense to shoot and edit 8K. Another big factor which I dropped was RAW. I love to shoot RAW on my C70, and the fact that I can do it on SD cards is amazing, but 8K RAW is super data heavy, and the 4K RAW on the R5C will only utilize the 4K resolution of the sensor, which means I'll be getting a big old crop and I wouldn't be getting the benefit of that lovely full frame chip. So everything that you see was shot at 4096 by 2160 DCI 4K resolution and an all intra codec, and to put it quickly and bluntly, it worked on my system perfectly. That's an Apple Silicon 16-inch MacBook Pro for reference. Which kind of brings me to my first point. This CF Express SD media dual card slot. I understand that media is getting better, faster bit rates and improving transfer speeds, but allowing one of one and one of the other is just kind of annoying. I guess it makes sense because this does feel like a true flagship hybrid with the DNA of Canon's cinema line and the photography line. So I guess splitting the cards for video and photo kind of makes sense. But there's other cameras out there with multimedia card slots, which is the way to go. These CF Express cards are actually also pretty pricey at the moment and don't really go far in the way of devices using them. I believe the C500 does, so maybe when you step up onto a production with a higher budget and you're using those cameras, it makes sense. But until these cards are adapted more widely and not on the other form of CF Express, these can be quite inconvenient. And also, I saw some limitations with the SD cards in the sense that they couldn't record all resolutions and codecs and all of that. I would have hoped that I'd have enough speed on the SD card to utilize the same codecs that the C70 has. I only had a V60 in during my trip, maybe a V90 would be better, but I was completely locked out of the S&Q mode, which allows those higher frame rates. I'm used to getting a traditional warning, which I can kind of mostly get away with, but on the R5C I was just completely locked out. But on the subject of codecs, this has everything to suit anyone's needs. 8K, 4K, all-I, long op, H.264, H.265, 10-bit 422, 420. It's actually quite stunning, the flavors of resolutions and codecs that this camera can spit out. It's also actually quite simple to understand what you're getting as well, because the menus just make it very simple and clear about what you're getting. Speaking of menus, as soon as you switch the power dial to the video setting on the R5C, you'll be in their cinema menu. And to anyone who's used this on any other Canon cinema camera, you'll be familiar. If you haven't used it, be prepared, because this is one of the nicest ways to understand and operate a camera. I won't do a rundown here, but it really is intuitive and thus really easy to get around. In fact, there's actually quite a lot to get around, and that is a good thing, because there are a lot of tools in here, and as far as I could tell, everything was mappable to the multitude of user buttons that are in and around the body. And as far as I could tell, everything was user mappable, and these buttons they're just in the right places. There was even a button in front of the hand grip on the front of the body where my ring finger sat, which I changed to false color, which was amazing if ever I was looking through the viewfinder and wanted to double check the exposure. And in fact, thinking about it, the ergonomics of the R5C hit everything in all the right ways. Everything down to the slight dips on the hand grip and the placements of the mode dials. After using the camera for maybe 20 to 30 minutes, I'd tuned it to how I wanted to use it, and through muscle memory was already adjusting settings without consciously thinking about it. So in terms of usability, I really got on with it. There was nothing frustrating about the camera. In terms of usability, it hits incredibly well. The camera has a decent weight to it. I never found myself fatigued with carrying it around, even with that big old 24-70 on the front. But with that heavier lens on, a bit further forward than what an RF lens would be, it was actually quite balanced and felt quite. In saying that, it was pretty balanced, and I think if using maybe that 28 to 70 f2, you're still going to get a nice balance. Going back to that EVF, it's great. Every camera, I think, should have an EVF on it. It's the only thing on my C70 that I'm missing. It's just great when you're out and about and you can just bring the camera to your eye, the viewfinder switches on, and you can get a nice, clear, unrestricted image of what you're seeing. And also, I didn't notice until quite late on using the camera, there's actually a higher refresh rate. I don't know if it's enabled from default. I don't know who had the camera before me. I would suspect that it's not, but you can double the refresh rate of the EVF, which makes it even better. And it was even better. The only problem with that is that it would probably have a slight knock-on effect with battery life. And also, I kind of actually did find one annoying quirk. When the LCD was out and I was actively recording, the EVF wouldn't activate when I brought my eye to the sensor. I'm not sure if there's a setting in the camera that changes that, and I don't know if there's a firmware update that has fixed that. It changed on every other occasion, so maybe it was just a quirk of the camera, but that was kind of annoying. You know, if you're filming down here and you just want to bring it up, it just wouldn't work. Not the end of the world, I should say, but something that's definitely fixable. On the subject of battery life, maybe I'm used to the big old chunky V-Locks and bigger broadcast batteries, but this camera absolutely chews through them. Like I'm talking maybe half an hour of shooting continuously before needing to change. It's not great. It's not great at all. I easily went through 2 or 3 batteries in 2 or 3 hours of shooting on and off which gave me plenty of battery anxiety. However, there are a few good ways to rig an external power source. You can either use the USB-C slot to power the camera from a power bank or a wall charger, and it can even charge the batteries when the camera's off, which means there's two ways to charge batteries out of the box, which I actually really like. I think this should be a feature in everything. I know more and more devices are using it. Hopefully it becomes a standard across the board. I also believe you can rig this in a way where you can use a D-tap cable from a V-Lock. I will make a note, however, you have to use an external power source to shoot 8K at 60 frames a second. Not that you would use that, not that I would use that a lot. Maybe you do, maybe you will, but just bear in mind if you are going to shoot 8K 60, you are going to need an external power source for that. But hey, maybe you're like me and you're shooting 4K. What are you going to shoot in? The R5C uses C-Log 3. Honestly, one of the nicer log profiles to work with. I do find myself using C-Log 3 instead of 2 on my C70 just because I think it's quicker to grade to my specific taste. The images, they're lovely. You know, not once did I look over anything until I was back at the train station on my laptop, and everything just looked super crispy, really lovely. Range was really good, and honestly, it didn't take a lot to get yourself into a really lovely space quickly, which I think is real key for anyone focusing on colouring work. As I say, I didn't even use RAW, so using that will open up another level of adjustability to the footage. It's fantastic. Like, in saying that, still probably not needed. But as mentioned earlier, the R5C has a lot of filmmaking tools. It's a cinema camera. It's got false color, which is my favorite way of looking at exposure. The usual stuff, zebra patterns and peaking, they're all there for exposure and manual focus. But the autofocus is actually fantastic. The face detection worked great, even with the adapter and the F-lens attached. It just locks and stays there super quickly. Even the sensitivity and the speed are user adjustable. I trust it. Maybe a nice slower push focus when your subject leaves frame, or just to get a nice snap on the eye during interviews. I only ever found fault in the autofocus in user error. When I was missing focus, it's because I'd forget to change from spot focusing or face detect. So it didn't do what I wanted it to do, but that's because I didn't tell it what I wanted it to do. It also works in the 120 frames 4K slow-mo mode. For what I could gather, it just used a wide frame rather than a specific face detect, but something is definitely better than nothing. One massive gripe I have with the camera is that stupid micro HDMI port. Can we all just agree to get rid of it? It's flimsy, it's finicky, and let's be honest, whoever has a cable. Full HDMI? Oh yeah, let me just go into my cable box and pull out one of 300 that I have in there. Micro? Mini HDMI? Oh yeah, let me see if I've got one in a gimbal kit I bought 3 years ago. I incorrectly assumed it would be a full HDMI slot on the camera. If it's something like my R7, smaller, less professional, and cheaper, yeah, absolutely, brilliant. I can live with it on the R7, but if this is marketed as a cinema camera, it's got to have full HDMI, or even SDI. We could argue about what makes a cinema camera all day, every day, but I think one thing that we can all agree on is that at the very least, please just include a full HDMI. Like, I didn't have a monitor with me at the time, but best believe if I did and saw that micro HDMI slot on the camera, God, something would have been thrown into the canals. Anyway, moving on. I'm not really that much in the way of a professional photographer anymore, so I don't really want to dive into the photo mode too much, but there's 45 odd megapixel stills, and they're just as impressive. I will hands up and admit that I just switched into photo mode and left it on auto and let it do its thing, but the images are full of detail, and even some shots that were overexposed when I did mess about a bit, I could recover everything and everything was fine. They're really nice files to work with. And to come back to the beginning of the video where I mentioned I was going to take an R7 and a C70 out with me, the convenience of just taking this was so much nicer than I ever thought it was going to be. There's a delay switching between video and photo modes, which isn't so much of an issue, but I've just read that they've improved that time in a recent firmware upgrade. The startup times are pretty snappy too. Not best, but certainly not the worst. And as an added bonus, it does that cool Canon thing where it lowers the shutter when the camera's off to protect the sensor. Again, that should be in everything. So all in all, completely solid 8K, 4K machine, gorgeous imagery, and a great amount of codecs and digital tools all packed into a nice handheld body. So all in all, a completely solid 8K, 4K camera. Gorgeous imagery, great amount of codecs and tools packed into a small handheld body. Feels like a camera worth investing in. Personally, great camera body. I don't think it's worth me investing in one over my C70, but if you're looking at getting a great hybrid camera that does great everything, albeit with a little caveat on battery life, I don't think you can go wrong. Certainly a competitive camera. I think if you're looking at getting one, definitely go out and rent one before you do. I'm happy I tested this. If I was looking at a camera, I'd probably look at investing just to consolidate everything into one package. Hope you found this video useful. It's not exactly what we had planned, definitely not what we thought we'd come away with, but all in all, hopefully you enjoy the stuff that I've shot. Any questions, just ask. Feel free to ask me in the comments below or on my Instagram. Thank you very much, and stay tuned for more videos.